Good morning, and welcome to St. Paul, United Church of Christ, Keokuk.
She sacrificed and took that and dropped that into the jar, into the offering plate. And you know what Jesus said? Oh, look, the microphone is up here. Yeah, and now it's live. Oh, yeah. All right. You know what Jesus said about that widow's offering? Jesus said that's a whole lot better than that thing that made the big thud. He said she really sacrificed to give that money. And you can tell how important God is to her. In our loose change, we also give to God. And I'm going to call this, we're going to keep this jar in the back of the church. Microphone is up here.
Run away.
Right here. And I'm going to keep this at the back of the church. And we're going to call this Pennies for Heaven. So if you have a bunch of pennies, put those in there. And this Sunday, I'm going to have a prize for the person who guesses, and it has to be one of you three, who guesses how many dollars are in here.
100.
Well, I don't know. Pat, will you go get some little pieces of paper so that when they go back, you can help them with their guessing for how much is in here? Each one will have a guess, all right? And then you'll get a prize. And when this fills up again, see, we're going to count it this week, and when it fills up again, and I'm going to have it about half full because this is heavy, then we're going to have another prize, and you're going to get to guess again. So we'll see how fast this penny jar fills up. Pennies for Heaven, for our mission in the church. Now, you're going to have to help me here carry it to the back of the church because this is heavy. I mean, you just try to, lift that up once. Oh. Yeah, all right. Okay, so what you're going to do is you help me carry it. Oh, you help me carry that, okay? And we're not going to put it with a big thud on there. We're just going to do real quiet. I can tell when you let go because this is very heavy. You got just enough there to help me out a little bit, which is good. Who knows? If you didn't help me, I might be walking funny for a whole week after carrying this thing. Okay, we're going to set it right here. Okay, now they're going to help you, just help them out a little bit. Each one with their name on it and what their guess is on how much money is in there. That's a jar that's been sitting around my house for a long time. It might as well go to work for the church. As a matter of fact, if we have money laying around like that, the best stewardship is to send it to the church to work on the mission. So that's why we have that loose change basket, and that's why we have that penny jar. And let's see how fast that penny jar fills up. All right? Okay. I know I'm going to bring some of my pennies again. All right. So let's pray together. Lord, thank you that we can give to the church. Help us to be like that poor widow who gave all she had. She had. Amen. Very good. Now you go guess what's in that jar, okay? How many dollars is in that jar? Well, I'm really glad to get rid of that jar because that thing is heavy, I'll tell you. Okay, so they're all going to guess. Everybody's going to get a chance to have a chance at the prize there. So if you have loose change laying around the house, keep in mind that it could work for the mission and work of God. I have a lot of, I found a baggie of loose change the other day. You know what I found the other day? I found a McDonald's bag with loose change in it. I don't know what possessed me to put it in there, but it's been sitting around. Cleaning a house. With winter is coming and the days will become much shorter, and this means that the dust bunnies are given a little bit of a break. Because you can't see them, they tend to reflect the light, and as it gets darker and darker and darker, you just can't see those dust bunnies rolling around. At least I like to say that I don't see them because, house cleaning is a chore. So they just roll around and they have kind of a break. However, when you get into the spring, then you've got a different story, don't you? Because the light reflects off of them, and yes, you can see them. So you're inspired to do a little house cleaning because you can see that there's something wrong. Something needs to be taken care of. And the same was true when Christ arrived. You see, Christ is the light of the world. And as the light of the world, Christ puts out a lot of light, and I'll tell you, those dust bunnies in our life, they really come out. Because Christ is there shining light on everything. The light reveals a lot of stuff that needs to be taken care of. And that's what happened when Christ came to the temple, because he realized that they were putting things in front of what the temple was really for. The temple was supposed to be a house of prayer. But you know what? They had a lot of merchandising going on because you need doves for your offering, right? So there were people who supplied those. You needed all sorts of devotional things probably, or things that you could use for devotion. There were merchants to supply those. So the temple began to look like some sort of emporium. It began to look like Walmart. And people were forgetting that this was a house of prayer. Now, I'm sure that the merchants had all kinds of good reasons for being there. Well, they were saying in this free market here, it gives people a lot of opportunity to have all sorts of doves that they can offer, and it gives them a lot of opportunity to buy devotional things. But you might as well have had a neon light up there and all kinds of merchandising going on. What Mel Brooks would call the shorts, if you remember his movies. Well, Jesus came in and said, wait a minute. How can we be doing all of this merchandising and forget about this being the house of prayer? We see the dust bunnies there. People don't see it, when they've been doing this for a long time. After a while, they get used to it. But Jesus saw the dust bunnies that needed to be cleaned up. And he didn't allow people to be walking through the temple with their merchandise. As a matter of fact, he came and overturned the money changers' tables and began to say some things that weren't too nice because he wanted to get their attention. People had just forgotten about what was really important. And they had turned the temple into a store, basically. And the worship of God, the prayer directed toward God, the worshipful atmosphere had become secondary to the merchandising that was going on. He said, "My house will be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers." And we read that on reaching Jerusalem, Jesus entered the temple area and began driving out those who were buying and selling there, overturned the tables of the money changers and the benches of those selling doves, and would not allow anyone to carry merchandise through the temple courts. As he taught them, he says that my house shall be a house of prayer. The chief priests and leaders of the law heard this and began looking for a way to kill him because he was highlighting things that were wrong, things that actually they should have seen, but they got so used to this that Well, they didn't really even think about it anymore. We can get used to all kinds of things and not think about it anymore until the light is shining on it. Just like during the winter, we can get used to those dust bunnies because we don't really see them in the corners. But when the light comes and shines on it, then we have the unpleasant reality that we haven't looked at them for a while. And Jesus came to the temple and cleaned house because he felt, and rightly so, that people had gotten used to something that they shouldn't have. It was in the darkness, maybe that they couldn't see it, the darkness of their minds, which got used to things and wouldn't look at things critically anymore. Well, he let them know. Jesus exposed problems in the temple, and then Jesus began to clean house. See, the problem is that we get used to some things. We get used to some things, and after a while, we're so used to them, we don't even think about it anymore. It isn't that we have bad intentions. We don't have bad intentions. It's just after a while, we don't think about it anymore. We're so used to it. There's an old story which is often used about if you take a frog and put him in a pan. Now, don't do this at home, but if you take a frog and put him in a pan and then you slowly turn up the heat, it's a cold-blooded animal and it won't notice that the heat is slowly coming up, so it won't hop out of the pan in order to help itself. It'll just slowly boil. And it won't even protect itself. So you have a boiled frog. Now, I won't carry that any further because you probably don't want to think about it any further, but that's the case. That's the case, and it can happen with us. It can happen with us. We can get so used to something, we don't think about it anymore, but I'll tell you, before you know it, we're in trouble. And that's exactly what happened in the temple. And to a large degree, the point that I want to make is that a lot of it is happening in our society right now, and that's what makes the church so critically important, because when we have our mission that we support with our contributions, we come to the world and we say, you've gotten used to this. But you know what? Under the light of Christ, you have forgotten the fundamentals by which you should be living as children of God. That's why the church is so important in its witness, because it has that role within our society. And we are the messengers of that. That is why the church is so important. Now, the society has a lot of things that it's gotten used to. It focuses on a lot of things that it's gotten used to. And essentially, it likes to focus on the economy. And the economy, by all accounts, appears to be good, even though the stock market took a sudden dive here a little while back. That was supposed to be a kind of a correction. The economy has been pretty good. The unemployment has been down, and it's at historically low levels. And interest rates are in fact rising in order to combat what seems to be a little bit of inflation. So all of those signs seem to indicate that we live in good times, except for one thing. We've gotten so used to looking at things like that. We've gotten so used to looking at all of the markets and looking at all of the things that are going to keep people happy because the economy is supposedly very good. But the spiritual life underneath everything, how often do we hear about that? How often do we hear an index of how people are doing in their spirits, how they're doing in the meaning of their life? How often do we hear about that? And if we scratch the surface of this good economy, what do we find? We find an opioid epidemic that is taking about 60,000 people a year in overdoses. So a small town is disappearing every year in overdoses. that may indicate something. See, the spiritual level. I hear all sorts of things on the radio about how our economy is doing and how good things are in relation to that. But there's an odd thing that they keep mentioning. They say, the economy is good, but people don't seem to be quite as happy as we would expect them to be because the economy is good. They don't seem to be mentioning that so much, but they do mention other things like whether or not their society cares for them through health care and that sort of thing. And you get kind of a feeling underneath it all that what people really care about is whether or not they are cared about. Somebody cares. Spiritual. The spiritual end of things, you see. Do we have an index for that? The suicide rate is up quite high. All of those things are indicators that we as a church have a job to do. We as a church need to give people the realization that they don't live by bread alone, that there are some dust bunnies in our society. And mainly, it's because our focus is often quite directly on the economy, very, very often not so much on how people are feeling inside. The spiritual life of people. Your role in relation to that, in the mission that we do, is crucial right now in our society. Because we see these indicators like the opioid crisis, because we see more people in depression and so forth. You see, people need to realize that their spiritual life needs attention. They don't live by bread alone. Just like the temple didn't live just by merchandising alone, so also people don't live by bread alone. People need to realize, and we have that message, and we need to be effective in bringing it out there. People don't realize that they need to have healthy spiritual lives, that they need to look at the Spirit, that they need to look at one of the main things that they have in life, the fundamentals, which is that they look after their spiritual lives. Now, the fundamental function that we can work on is discipleship, and that is to try to get more people in our society to come to church. And we run across resistance, of course. Why? Because people have gotten used to various things. They've gotten used to perhaps doing something else on a Sunday, you see, and putting something else as being more important. It doesn't mean they're bad. It just means that they've gotten used to it, and they need to get into the habit again of coming to church, of having that spiritual resource and that strength on a weekly basis. Well, I have people that say, well, I listened to it on the radio. And there was a minister once who came to a household and somebody said something like that, and the fireplace was going, and the minister took the tongs and took a coal out of the fireplace and set it on that little brick part in front, and the coal started to die out. And he didn't say a thing. The minister didn't say a thing. But the person was in church the next Sunday because that coal was dying out because it didn't have the interaction with other people. One of the great maladies of our society is that, yes, we stuff our lives full of all sorts of things, but we are isolated and alone. And that's one of the reasons why substances are a big problem these days. We are isolated and alone. Some years ago, there was a book written, and it was called Bowling Alone. Now, how many people do you see bowling alone? How many people do you see bowling alone? But one of the things that this author began to realize was that more people were doing that kind of thing. And this has been this has actually been a thing in our society for some time. Robert D. Putnam wrote, "Bowling Alone, The Collapse and Revival of American Community." Bowling is a very social activity, but imagine somebody bowling alone. And people do a lot of other things alone now. Lodges struggle for membership. Churches, people have gotten out of the habit. And they've forgotten that they need to be with other people in order to practice cooperation, giving, loving, working together, feeling the support of other people. I had somebody who came in the other day, asked for money. I checked for signs of drug use. Yeah, they were there. And I said, "I tell you what, you come and worship with the fellowship, then we'll talk about that. Because without that, you don't have any support." And then I found later that he'd been going around to other people in the community asking for money, and the money had been used for things which didn't help. Isolation was what they were experiencing. Isolation, and coming together with a fellowship is the cure for that, not money. Money seems to be the cure because your companion may be drugs, you see, but that will isolate you further. The big problem in our society now, one of the things that leads to so much drug use, is isolation. People are isolating themselves in their electronic devices. When I was younger, not that I'm that old right now, but when I was younger, we did things with our cousins. We had family reunions and so forth. Now you see people absorbed in their devices and that sort of thing. And also people, extremely, that you might say that would help to bring people together through Facebook and so forth, but the communication is very superficial. You can't get into deep things in Facebook because people won't understand. They'll probably misunderstand. We have to be together in order to learn how to do all of the things that God is teaching us to do. But you know what? Our society has gotten used to being isolated. Only coming together with other people when you want something. Now, the good news of Jesus tells us different, doesn't it? It tells us that we are servants of everyone around us. It tells us that we work for the common good. It tells us that the last thing in the world we want to do is isolate. It tells us that the first thing we want to do if we move to a town is find a fellowship of the faithful and to begin to do all of the things serving one another that keep us healthy spiritually. That's what the gospel tells us. It doesn't tell us to isolate. It doesn't tell us just to go with people if they can do something for us, because we can't stay healthy that way. We just can't stay healthy that way. Those are the dust bunnies in our lives, and because the light of Jesus reveals them, we change. But our society has become used to it. It's like the frog in the pan. And it's not because people are bad. It's just because we've gotten used to it. Our role in making disciples, at whatever level you can do it, maybe you have a relative who you can invite to church. Maybe you have a friend that you can invite to church and get involved in fellowship. And in doing so, you're helping them to pull out of that thing in our society which is causing a problem. The isolation. People are so isolated and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. We have a crucial role in making disciples. It is crucial. It isn't just asking people to come to church in order to have more people in church. It has to do with saving lives. Because if people are real isolated and they don't even know it, if people are going in the wrong direction and they don't even know it, then their life really depends on finding a fellowship. We give people an opportunity to be spiritually healthy. We give them an opportunity to clean house by eliminating self-centeredness and greed. We give them an opportunity to see the areas in their lives that need attention and put what's most important first, which is our fellowship with Jesus Christ in the fellowship of all believers in the body of Christ. Discipleship is much more than just having more people in church. You have a role in saving people who have become used to something which is going to lead them into a very unhappy place spiritually. They may actually seem happy, but they still don't know, do they? They still don't know. They could be a lot happier. It's important for us to clean house in our society in that way because we're becoming more and more isolated, more and more divided. During the American Revolution, we worked together for a common necessity because things were focusing in that direction because of the conflict. And I remember Benjamin Franklin in the Continental Congress, about the time the Declaration of Independence was signed. He said, "We must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly, we will all hang separately." The trend toward not associating and isolating in our society, which people have gotten used to. And they'll say, well, I don't isolate, I watch TV, I do this and that. Yeah, but a lot of it is very superficial. You don't get the kind of dedication to lodges and other organizations that you used to. If we can change that, if we can change that by seeing that we can reach out and then doing so, it makes a big difference in our society. You are very important. You have a crucial role in making strong, healthy spirits, eliminating self-centeredness, greed, all of those sort of things. Sometimes we say, oh, we wish things were different in our society, or we say, oh, gee, it seems like people are kind of self-centered in our society. It's true. But we are the ones who go out and give a different message. Each one of you is crucial in doing that. If you know somebody who's more isolated and that sort of thing, encourage them to come to church and experience that fellowship. It is crucial for their spiritual lives. We may be doing well economically, but spiritually, we need some help. And you are the agents of that help. When we make disciples, we work toward putting service and cooperation first in the world by cleaning out that self-centeredness and greed, which is starving us spiritually. Our bellies may be full, but spiritually we're starving. We're like those trappers who, early on, exploring the West, had their bellies full of rabbit meat and died of malnutrition because they were lacking something important in their diet. Their bellies were full. So we are the agents of telling people that in fact they can be healthy spiritually. Amen.
You have been listening to St. Paul United Church of Christ, 2030 Plank Road, Keokuk. Join our worship service at 10 a.m. with fellowship hour immediately following. Until next week, may God bless.